Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I want to buy Sunridge Estates, I repeated. All of it. Another silence. You're serious, aren't you? Dead serious, I said. This is insane. My journey to suburban warfare began, ironically, with a quest for peace. I'd spent my 20s building a tech startup, pouring every ounce of my energy into coding, marketing, and endless rounds of venture capital pitches. When Meta finally bought us out, I was, to put it mildly, financially comfortable. But I was also exhausted, burnt out, and desperately in need of a change of pace, so I did what any newly minted, slightly bewildered millionaire would do. I bought a house in the suburbs, Sunridge Estates. It sounded idyllic, peaceful, the perfect place to decompress, recharge, and enjoy the fruits of my labor. I pictured myself grilling on the patio, maybe taking up gardening, and generally living a quiet, uncomplicated life. I wasn't your typical millionaire. I didn't want a yacht or a private jet. I just wanted a comfortable house, a decent grill, and the freedom to do whatever I wanted with my own damn property. Apparently, that was too much to ask, I thought, as I surveyed my new, surprisingly spacious backyard. It had a nice lawn, a few mature trees, and plenty of room for, well, whatever I wanted. I should have known that moving into a neighborhood with an HOA was like signing up for a lifetime subscription to petty tyranny. The first red flag should have been the welcome basket, which included a meticulously organized binder of HOA rules and regulations, thicker than War and Peace. My first encounter with the dark side of suburbia came in the form of a crisp, white envelope slipped under my front door. It was a Welcome to Sunridge Estates letter, followed by a friendly reminder about several neighborhood guidelines, and a warning. Apparently, my garden gnome, a cheerful little fellow named Gary, was unauthorized. The letter was signed in a meticulously neat cursive script by Gerald T. Higginbotham, President, Sunridge Estates Homeowners Association. Gerald T. Higginbotham. The T stood for tyrannical, I suspected. He was a retired bank executive with a permanent scowl, a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to his hand, and a deep-seated belief that the HOA was his personal fiefdom. He was the kind of guy who probably ironed his socks and alphabetized his spice rack by Scoville units. I pictured him as the type who measured his lawn with a ruler and reported any dandelion that dared to show its yellow head. A few days later, Gerald himself appeared on my doorstep, clipboard in hand, ready to deliver his friendly reminder in person. "Mr. Davis," he began, his voice a dry, nasal drone, "I see you've received our welcome letter. I trust you're familiar with the HOA guidelines?" "I skimmed them," I admitted. "Skimmed," he repeated, his eyebrows rising in disapproval. "Mr. Davis, the HOA guidelines are not to be skimmed. They are to be followed, to the letter." He then proceeded to lecture me at length about the unacceptable placement of my garden gnome, the excessive height of my grass — it was perhaps a day overdue for a mowing — and the unauthorized color of my mailbox. It was a standard dark green mailbox, but apparently not the right shade of dark green. It was a masterclass in petty tyranny, a performance designed to establish dominance and crush any hint of independent thought. The gnome incident was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I received a steady stream of HOA violations, each one more ridiculous than the last. There was the fine for parking my car in my own driveway for an extended period of time. It was there for 2 days while I was on a weekend trip. There was the warning about my excessively festive holiday decorations, a single string of colored lights deemed too bright and distracting. There was the complaint about the unruly growth of my rose bushes. They were admittedly a bit overgrown, but they were also roses, not some invasive species threatening to engulf the neighborhood. Each violation was accompanied by a sternly worded letter from Gerald, filled with passive-aggressive threats and citations of obscure HOA bylaws. He'd patrol the street, his clipboard held aloft like a weapon, his eyes scanning for any deviation from his meticulously crafted vision of suburban perfection. My internal reaction was a mixture of annoyance, frustration, and a growing sense of disbelief. Was this really my life now? Arguing with a retired bank executive about the proper placement of garden gnomes and the acceptable shade of green for a mailbox? This was insane, I thought. I tried to be reasonable. I tried to explain. I even tried to comply with some of the more ridiculous demands. But it was no use. Gerald T. Higginbotham was on a mission, and I was his target. The HOA, it seemed, was not just a governing body, it was a weapon, wielded by a man determined to enforce his will upon everyone around him. The final straw came in the form of a particularly hefty fine, delivered by Gerald himself, with a smug smile and a condescending lecture. It was for a combination of violations. My grass was a quarter-inch too long, my mailbox was still the wrong shade of green, and I had failed to remove a temporary basketball hoop from my driveway within the HOA-mandated 24-hour period. "Mr. Davis," Gerald said, his voice dripping with self-importance, "we have been more than patient with you. We have given you numerous warnings, but you continue to flout the rules, to disregard the standards of our community. If you want to live here, you must follow our rules." He thrust the fine notice towards me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. I took the paper, looked at it, and then looked back at Gerald. A slow smile spread across my face. "Oh, I'll follow your rules all right," I thought, a plan, audacious and wonderfully subversive, beginning to form in my mind. Straight into a black hole of bureaucracy. This wasn't just about gnomes, or grass height, or basketball hoops anymore. This was about principle. It was about the right to live in my own home, on my own property, without being harassed by a power-hungry tyrant. "Gerald T. Higginbotham, you want to play power games? Game on! Prepare to be outbought," I declared internally, a surge of defiant energy coursing through me. It was time to take this fight to the next level. It was time to dismantle the HOA, brick by beige brick. My initial reaction to Gerald's latest ultimatum was a burning desire for revenge, but I knew that direct confrontation would be futile. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to fight back that wouldn't just annoy Gerald but would dismantle his entire power structure, so I started digging. I researched the HOA, its bylaws, its history, its legal standing. I spent hours poring over documents, reading the fine print, searching for a weakness, a loophole, a chink in the armor. I felt like a detective, uncovering a conspiracy, a suburban rebel plotting the overthrow of a tyrannical regime. And then I found it, buried deep within the HOA's governing documents, in a section I'd previously glossed over, was a crucial piece of information. The Sunridge Estates Homeowners Association, it turned out, was not an independent entity. It was a management agreement, a contract between the homeowners and the real owner of the property, a large real estate development company called Suburban Dreams, Inc. The entire neighborhood, the houses, the streets, the common areas, even the meticulously manicured lawns that Gerald so cherished were all owned by this company. The HOA was simply a management tool, a way for the developers to maintain control and ensure conformity and property values until all the lots were sold. It was like finding the Death Star's exhaust port, a single vulnerable point that, if exploited correctly, could bring the whole system crashing down, I thought, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. The implications were staggering. If I could somehow acquire Suburban Dreams, Inc., I would effectively own the entire neighborhood. And if I owned the neighborhood, I owned the HOA. My next call was to my lawyer, Sarah, the same one who'd helped me with the billboard of shame incident. She'd become a trusted ally, a fellow warrior in the fight against suburban tyranny. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I have a proposition for you. A rather unusual one." I outlined my plan, explaining my discovery about Suburban Dreams, Inc., and my intention to buy the entire neighborhood. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You want to... what?" she finally asked, her voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. "I want to buy Sunridge Estates," I repeated. "All of it." Another silence. Then a slow chuckle. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious," I said. "This is... insane," she said, but I could hear the admiration in her voice. "It's also brilliant, absolutely gloriously brilliant." Next, I called my financial advisor, Mark. His reaction was similar. Initial shock, followed by a grudging respect for the sheer audacity of the plan. "It'll cost a fortune, you know," he warned me. "I know," I said, "but think of it as an investment in peace of mind, and a very large, very satisfying screw you to Gerald T. Higginbotham." Mark laughed. "Okay," he said, "let's do it. Let's buy a neighborhood." With Sarah and Mark on board, the wheels were set in motion. Sarah began researching the legal intricacies of the deal, while Mark started crunching the numbers and arranging the financing. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was also, I believed, perfectly achievable. The negotiation process was a whirlwind of conference calls, legal documents, and high-stakes financial maneuvering. Suburban Dreams, Inc., it turned out, was not entirely opposed to selling. They were a large corporation, and Sunridge Estates was just one small piece of their vast portfolio. They were primarily interested in the bottom line, and my offer, while certainly unexpected, was generous. Sarah, a master negotiator, played hardball. She identified weaknesses in the HOA's management agreement, pointed out potential liabilities, and generally made it clear that selling to me was the easiest and most profitable option for the company. There were hurdles, of course. There were legal complexities, zoning regulations, and endless paperwork to navigate. There were moments when I doubted whether the deal would actually go through, moments when I questioned my own sanity. Buying a single house was stressful enough. Buying an entire neighborhood was a whole new level of anxiety. But finally, after weeks of intense negotiations, the deal was struck. I, the former tech entrepreneur, the guy who just wanted a quiet life in the suburbs, was now the proud owner of Sunridge Estates. Every house, every street, every blade of grass, every meticulously manicured flower bed, every garden gnome, it was all mine. It was the most insane, most extravagant, most satisfying purchase of my life. I'd just bought an entire neighborhood just to spite one power-hungry HOA president, I thought, staring at the signed contract, a feeling of giddy triumph washing over me. It was a victory beyond my wildest dreams, a power move so audacious, so unexpected, that it would leave Gerald T. Higginbotham speechless. And that, I realized, was the best part of all. The key to my plan was secrecy. I didn't want Gerald or anyone else in the HOA to know about the purchase until the moment was right. I wanted to savor the surprise, to relish the look on their faces when I revealed my ultimate power move. So I kept quiet. I continued to play the role of the disgruntled homeowner, attending HOA meetings, enduring Gerald's lectures, and even paying the, now utterly meaningless, fines. I was like a coiled spring, a volcano waiting to erupt, a Viking warrior preparing to unleash his fury. In the meantime, I started working behind the scenes. I reviewed the HOA bylaws, the management agreement, and all the other relevant documents, familiarizing myself with the intricacies of my new position. I discovered that, as the owner of the development company, I had virtually unlimited power. I could change the rules, I could fire the board, I could even, if I wanted to, dissolve the HOA entirely. I prepared a folder, a thick binder filled with my new rules, my new vision for Sunridge Estates. It was a manifesto of freedom, a declaration of independence from HOA tyranny. It was the antithesis of everything Gerald T. Higginbotham stood for, and I couldn't wait to unleash it. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the final, glorious act of my suburban revenge was about to begin. The next HOA meeting was, predictably, a Gerald T. Higginbotham production. He'd scheduled it specifically to address my latest violation, a temporary inflatable hot tub that I'd set up in my backyard. Apparently, it was too visible from the street and disrupted the neighborhood aesthetic. I arrived at the meeting, calm, confident, and carrying a large unmarked folder. I took my usual seat in the back row, a picture of quiet defiance. The room was filled with the usual suspects, the timid retirees, the nosy neighbors, and the handful of Gerald's loyal sycophants, all eager to witness my public shaming. Gerald, perched at the head table like a judge presiding over a trial, began the meeting with his usual self-important pronouncements. He droned on about community standards, property values, and the importance of maintaining a harmonious aesthetic. He then launched into a lengthy and frankly boring lecture about the proper placement of inflatable hot tubs, citing obscure bylaws and referencing, incorrectly I suspected, various architectural principles. He was clearly enjoying himself, relishing the opportunity to flex his power and humiliate me in front of the assembled neighbors. He was building up to the grand finale, the moment when he would impose yet another ridiculous fine, another petty punishment for my refusal to conform. And that's when I made my move. I stood up, cleared my throat, and said in a calm, clear voice, "Actually, Gerald, before you go any further, I have an announcement to make." Gerald looked at me, his eyes narrowed, his lips pursed in annoyance. "Mr. Henderson," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "this is not the time for your comments. We are discussing a serious violation of HOA regulations." "Oh, I know," I replied, with a smile. "But I think this announcement is relevant to everyone." I paused, letting the anticipation build. The room was silent, all eyes on me. Even Gerald seemed momentarily flustered. I opened the folder, revealing the meticulously prepared documents within. "As of this morning," I said, my voice ringing with authority, "there's been a slight change in the ownership structure of Sunridge Estates." I continued, letting the words sink in, watching the expressions on the faces of the assembled HOA members shift from boredom to confusion to a dawning sense of horror. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the sole owner of this entire subdivision." The room erupted in chaos, whispers, murmurs, gasps of disbelief. Gerald's face, which had been a mask of smug satisfaction just moments before, went pale. He looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon, whole. This, you can't do that," he sputtered, his voice cracking with outrage. He stood abruptly, knocking his meticulously arranged papers onto the floor. "Oh, I can, and I did," I replied calmly. "Check the county records, Gerald. It's all perfectly legal. I bought Suburban Dreams, Inc., the development company that owned Sunridge Estates, lock, stock, and garden gnomes. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, of the infamous petunia and wind chime complaints, let out a gasp and spilled her coffee, the hot liquid splashing onto the beige carpet. It was a perfect symbol of the chaos that was about to engulf the HOA. Gerald's carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, his power, his authority, his entire reason for being, was dissolving before his very eyes. He stammered, he fumed, he tried to bluster, but it was no use. The other HOA members, sensing the shift in power, looked at him with a mixture of fear and pity. They'd been loyal to him for years, blindly following his ridiculous rules, but now they saw him for what he was. A petty tyrant, stripped of his authority, a king without a kingdom. With Gerald temporarily speechless, a rare and beautiful sight, I took control of the meeting. I opened my folder and began reading out the new rules, the new vision for Sunridge Estates. First order of business, I declared. All outstanding HOA fines are hereby forgiven. Consider it a fresh start. A collective gasp of relief went through the room. Secondly, I continued, the following rules are hereby abolished. The restrictions on mailbox color, the limitations on holiday decorations, the ban on garden gnomes, basically all the ridiculous rules that have made living in this neighborhood a living hell for the past few years. A wave of murmurs and applause swept through the room. People were actually smiling. And finally, I said, my voice rising with dramatic flair, I hereby decree that Sunridge Estates shall henceforth be a community of fun, creativity, and individual expression. We shall embrace diversity, encourage eccentricity, and celebrate the unique character of each and every homeowner. I then proceeded to read out a list of new guidelines designed to foster a more relaxed and enjoyable atmosphere. Mandatory fun, gnome encouragement zones, maximum grass height, knee-high, or whatever, honestly. Holiday decorations encouraged, the more outrageous the better. Driveways are for parking, playing, and generally enjoying life, and, my personal favorite, fines are illegal. The HOA is now a community social club only. The reaction was overwhelming. People cheered, they clapped, they even started chanting my name. It was a scene of pure, unadulterated joy, a celebration of freedom from HOA tyranny. But I wasn't finished yet. There was one final, crucial step to complete my suburban revolution. And now, I said, turning my attention back to Gerald, who was still standing at the podium looking like a deflated balloon, there's the matter of the HOA board. I paused for dramatic effect. Gerald, I said, my voice dripping with mock sympathy, you've served this community diligently for many years, but I think it's time for a change, a fresh start. I gestured towards the assembled HOA board members, a collection of Gerald's loyal and now thoroughly terrified followers. Effective immediately, I declared. The current HOA board is dissolved. You're fired, all of you. Gerald's reaction was, predictably, apoplectic. He sputtered, he fumed, he threatened legal action, but it was all for naught. I was the owner, and I had the legal right to do whatever I wanted. I then proceeded to appoint a new HOA board, hand-picked from the most laid-back, fun-loving, and generally anti-Gerald residents of Sunridge Estates. Mrs. Gable, surprisingly, was my first choice. She had always secretly hated Gerald. Mr. Henderson, the gnome enthusiast, was another. I even appointed a few of the teenagers who'd been harassed by the HOA over the years. It was a complete and utter reversal of power, a glorious revolution, a suburban coup d'etat. And it was all thanks to Gerald T. Higginbotham's obsession with rules and regulations. He'd pushed me too far, and I'd pushed back. And I'd won, big time. Gerald T. Higginbotham's response to my hostile takeover of Sunridge Estates was, predictably, a mixture of outrage, denial, and threats. He threw a fit of epic proportions, stomping his feet, sputtering insults, and vowing to fight this injustice to the bitter end. He threatened to sue me, to sue the development company, to sue the entire neighborhood, if necessary. But it was all for naught. His power was gone, his authority shattered, his reign of terror over. He was a king without a kingdom, a tyrant without an army, a clipboard-wielding warrior without a cause. He spent a few weeks skulking around the neighborhood, glaring at anyone who dared to smile, muttering darkly about the decline of civilization and the erosion of community standards. But eventually, even he realized the futility of his resistance. One morning, a moving truck appeared in front of his house. He supervised the loading of his meticulously organized belongings, his face a mask of bitter resentment. He didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't offer a farewell wave, just climbed into his car and drove away, leaving behind a legacy of beige conformity and a neighborhood that was finally, gloriously, free. The transformation of Sunridge Estates was swift and dramatic. Under the new, improved HOA, which I'd cleverly renamed the Sunridge Estates Community Association, the neighborhood blossomed into a vibrant, welcoming, and delightfully unregulated community. The first order of business was to dismantle Gerald's legacy of petty tyranny. We abolished the ridiculous rules about mailbox colors, grass height, and holiday decorations. We replaced the endless stream of violation notices with friendly reminders and community newsletters. We even organized a Gnome Liberation Day, encouraging residents to proudly display their previously forbidden garden ornaments. But we didn't stop there. We transformed the HOA from a force of restriction into a force for fun. We organized neighborhood BBQ nights, complete with live music, inflatable bouncy houses for the kids, and, of course, an open bar. We established a community beer and pizza fund, ensuring that no gathering would ever be without refreshments. We even started holding fun competitions, like the most outrageous lawn flamingo display and the best decorated mailbox contest, with prizes, naturally. Sunridge Estates, once a stifling, conformist wasteland, was now a place where people actually enjoyed living. A place where neighbors were friends, where laughter was encouraged, and where individuality was celebrated. It was a revolution, a suburban renaissance, and it was all thanks to one man's burning desire for revenge. And then, of course, there was the unexpected bonus: property values. As word spread about the new Sunridge Estates, the neighborhood became a hot commodity. People were drawn to the relaxed atmosphere, the sense of community, and yes, even the slightly rebellious reputation. Houses that had been languishing on the market for months were suddenly selling for above asking price. Real estate agents started using the phrase HOA-free living in their listings, a not-so-subtle dig at the old regime. The neighborhood, once known for its stifling rules and regulations, was now being touted as a haven for free spirits, a place where you could actually live your life without fear of being fined for having the wrong shade of petunias. The irony, of course, was delicious. Gerald T. Higginbotham, in his obsessive quest to maintain property values through conformity, had actually depressed them. It was only by embracing individuality, by rejecting his narrow vision of suburban perfection, that we'd unlocked the true potential of Sunridge Estates. To commemorate our victory, and to ensure that the spirit of Gerald T. Higginbotham never again darkened our doorstep, I instituted an annual tradition: the Gerald Memorial Party. He wasn't actually dead, of course, just dead to us. It was held every year on the anniversary of my neighborhood purchase, a day that would forever be known in Sunridge Estates lore as Independence Day. It was a raucous, joyous celebration, a festival of freedom, a giant middle finger to the very concept of HOA tyranny. We'd have live music, food trucks, games, and of course, a ceremonial burning of an effigy of Gerald, made from recycled HOA violation notices, naturally. It was a chance for the community to come together, to celebrate our newfound freedom, and to remember the dark days of the past, lest we ever be tempted to return to them. A year after my suburban coup, a new family moved into Gerald's old house. The husband, a friendly, unassuming guy named Mike, stopped by one afternoon to introduce himself. "So," he said, after we'd exchanged the usual pleasantries, "I hear there's an HOA in this neighborhood. Is it strict?" He looked slightly apprehensive. I chuckled. "Oh, buddy," I said, shaking my head. "We don't do that here." I gave him a quick rundown of the history, careful to make clear that the days of strict rules and measuring grass were well in the past. He looked relived and laughed, and then wandered off to explore the neighborhood, with a spring in his step and an appreciation for just how good he had it. Who knew that a garden gnome and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just gotta buy an entire neighborhood to find your peace, I thought, watching him go, a profound sense of satisfaction washing over me. It had been a long, strange, and utterly ridiculous journey, but it had all been worth it. I raised my glass in a silent toast. To Sunridge Estates, may it forever be a haven for those who believe that life is too short for beige and bylaws.